Manora hamakom hazeh. Manora hamakom hazeh. And I'm going to do the prayer for the study of Torah. Okay, we're going to go to, here we go, Jews in Search of God, class 2. The blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation, who's made us holy with mitzvot and bid us to engage with words of Torah. We are doing a mitzvah. So glad to see so many people back today as we go to our second week of this series, this seminar, 5-week seminar on Jews in Search of God, from Bible to Kabbalah. And today we'll look at the Rabbinic God, the rabbis, their more personal view often of God. If you missed the first class, there's a recording. It was sent out. It's also on our Facebook page and our YouTube page, and we'll record this class too. So this evening, again, and also this evening is the only class that's on Wednesday, because tomorrow night is part of an ongoing series that's called Your Neighbor's Faith. And Pastor Vicky from Epworth is going to speak tomorrow, and a lot of our members go to that too. Okay. And you're welcome for the recording. So also, I just wanted today to go over what we sent out so you'd know what all those handouts were, in case you're wondering, what am I supposed to do with all the handouts, if you wish to do anything with them. And then we'll be looking at the chapter that we read about in Finding God, about the rabbi's view. Who were those rabbis? When did they live? And what was their view of God? And go in depth. We'll go in depth on some of the ideas that they shared in the chapter. So let me show you, again, sharing my screen, the email you got. Let's see what we can do. Okay, so you got actually, no, I want to show you the email you got. Okay, so if you got your email, now can you see the email? So, oh no, Zoom quit.
Yes.
That's okay, it. You can, thank you. I don't know, I'm getting weird messages from Zoom. Zoom has been very misbehaving today. All right,
it duplicates exactly what you sent out to us.
Okay, I'm just showing you that. What are those things? So on these handouts that I sent out, there's 5 handouts there, but those are really for your enrichment, okay? The Jews in Search of God overview, if you click on that one, and let me see if I do click on it, can you see, are you seeing something new now when I click on it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's like, it's just like a little syllabus that I made. I mean, it tells you about what the class is, what we're doing each week, and then the textbooks we're using, and also a whole list of like kind of a little bibliography, but it's really books that are really user-friendly, that if you want to read more on this subject and there's something you're interested in, I've given you a whole book list. I did slightly update that book list, so next time it goes out, do look at the new one, because it has a couple of other books and I corrected it a little bit. Okay, the other thing about the books is that when you look at the book of the Hebrew Goddess, I didn't require, quote unquote, for people to buy that, because it's it was a little expensive and a little hard to find, but now apparently it's gone into the public domain and it is available legit online. Oh, the one that we put on here is actually listed as a PDF, but we have shared on the website. Let's see if you can see on the website an even better place that you can get it online. I would go with the one that's on the website, where you can read it like in a reader, if you didn't get a hard copy of it, which is always wonderful. Can you all see how it is on the website? Mm-hmm. Okay, so then going back to
on my list, the 4th and the 5th were the same when I opened them.
Oh, they are, yes. The 4th and 5th one are the same. I see what she did. She sent you 2 PDFs. Okay. They shouldn't have been exact. One should be a PDF and one should have been a document so that you can fill it in. Yeah, that is actually an error. It should be the same thing, but one is a document so you could fill it in if you want. So I don't know why it got sent twice as a PDF, maybe to post, maybe it's a misunderstanding. Okay, so what that is some questions for yourself. Like if you want to take this further and begin to consider your own theology and your own ideas about God, these are sort of some you know, provocative questions for you to ask yourself, like, what was I taught about God? What have I outgrown? When have I ever felt close to God? What kind of a believer or unbeliever am I? Non-believer am I, etc. And the reason I tried to send it as a document is so that if you wanted to type the answers, you'd have them in it. You wouldn't have it just as a PDF, which you can't type on usually, unless you have special software. So you'd have it as a document. So yeah, we'll have to correct that next time. And then the other 2 things, the biblical theology contradictions. That one is actually a worksheet I made, or a source sheet I made for last time that we didn't have time for, but you could look at it on your own. It was to show you how ideas of God changed over time. There's 3 sets of ideas. First, that our early ancestors could accept the idea there were other gods, and later on they said, like, no, there's no comparison to our God. The others are mere idols. Our early ancestors had the idea that God could live in a little building that they built, whereas our later ancestors were like, no, God fills the universe. What kind of idea is that, to build a house for God? And then, you know, to a certain point, our ancestors thought that God was God because God didn't ever change the divine mind. God didn't change his mind. Whereas we know from the book of Jonah, from Yom Kippur, that in fact, God is forgiving and does, quote unquote, change his mind. So that was a little handout I made that we didn't use. But today I have one called Biblical Theodicy that we will hopefully use. And that's some different ideas about why bad stuff happens sometimes. And we'll take a look at that. Okay. So I think that's just to share with you what you got, all your all of your extra bonuses that you got there that you can use at home. All right. So now if you would like any questions, first of all, any questions about what we sent out besides what was already asked? I'm not seeing any hands up, but if you do want to use the hand raising thing to raise your hand, you can do that. The Hirschlers are still assisting me as my, my teaching assistants, so to speak. So what I'd like you to do is, if you would like to read today, you can. It's a little hard for me to see who wants to be called on to read, and I don't want people to feel like, oh, I only favor certain people. I'm happy to have whoever wants to read, as long as we have a lot of slides. So if you do want to read, we're going to use the raising hand, just like Carol demonstrated. You go to the reactions, and at the bottom of the reactions, you press raise hand, and that will put you in a little like line of people that want to raise hands. And then I'll let the Hirschlers call on people when it's time to read. Sound okay? And the only thing is,
are you ready to read, or
I'll show. Well, you'll be seeing. You'll see. Oh no, Carol, I think is gonna. She's showing us. Okay. So the other thing is, sometimes if the slide has a transliterated word in Hebrew, don't worry if you're not sure how to pronounce it. I'm not going to make a big deal. I don't need. If I'm correcting it, it's just for the benefit of other people to learn that word. It's not to critique the way you're reading it, but just a little hint that the vowels are transliterated like Spanish. If you took Spanish in high school, even if you didn't take Hebrew, it's a, e, I, o, u. And you know, try to read it, but if not, we'll help you out, and we appreciate your flexibility with that. Okay.
There are a couple of hands up now.
Okay.
Are you guys, do you have questions, or are you volunteering to read?
I think they're volunteering to read, hopefully.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll have to write in the chat. Okay. So
Okay,
we'll have
so
to have
you got
something
Michelle and Michael.
Okay. Great. So the first, okay, so I'm going to put up some, let's see, we've got something in the chat. No. Okay. So I'm going to start with the slides right now. Again. And the first one is just to review from last week, what are the texts that we're talking about? Can you all see this? Because I'm getting weird Zoom messages. Sorry about that. This is to review what we were learning about last week, which is the Tanakh, the Bible. So okay. Sorry, I seem to be kicked off by Zoom, which is very bad when I'm teaching, and I really have not been able to solve this. Let's try it again. And you can read it. Okay. Go ahead. Can you call on the first person to read?
Yeah, Michael Lucian.
It's actually Barbara. I'm sorry.
That's Barbara.
Yeah. Jewish holy texts flow from the Torah, 5 books of Moses, and Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, which contains Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Together, these are the written Torah, Torah Shabbat, recalls our people's saga almost 2 millennium prior to the Common Era.
Okay, that's what we were looking at last time. All these many ideas of God in these 39 books. 39 if you count each individual one, like 1st and 2nd Samuel is 2 different books. That's one way to count it, right? And that's our Tanakh, that's our written Torah. And we saw that, what did we see last time? That there were many different metaphors for God, names for God, 2 major names, Yud He Vav He, Yah, and Elohim, that might have come from 2 different sources and 2 different periods. And then we saw that there was a lot of emphasis on encounter with God. God has a firsthand experience, and on covenant with God. These covenants, these kind of like treaties that people had with ancient emperors, ancient kings. You had a covenant, what you owed them, and that was like our relationship to God in certain ways. And now we're going to get into a different period. Okay, another reader then. So Herschler's unmute and call on another reader.
Michelle Weiner.
Rabbinic literature is the next layer of Jewish wisdom in its classic phase, covering the early centuries of the Common Era. At first, this vast collection was an oral tradition, Torah Sheba'al Peh, and it is still studied aloud and in community. The main genres of texts are Talmud, collections of rabbinic legal discussions and lore rooted in the Bible, and Midrash, legal and imaginative commentaries on the Bible.
Okay. So I'm going to stop this for a moment. So now we're getting into, I could say, what I would call my special interest as far as Jewish studies, because that's, if you saw, that's what I did my graduate study in, is rabbinic literature. And rabbinic literature is a very large body of literature, much bigger than the Hebrew Bible. For example, if you look at the Tanakh, you know, even those 39 books are bound into one book, even if you put all the commentaries in it. But if you look at the Mishnah, which is like the first collection of Jewish law, legal teachings that was edited around 200 in the land of Israel in Hebrew, it's about the size of like the Baltimore City phone book, if you remember what a phone book is, okay? I couldn't use that with undergraduates anymore because they don't know what phone books are. But if you look at the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, which is centuries more of arguments, legal arguments, discussions, sharing stories, lore, it expanded and expanded in something called the Gemara, like the commentary around the Mishnah. Okay, you get the Talmud, and that is so big that there are people that study it every day. Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi is a daily study of a whole page front and back, like 45 minutes a day to study this page. You never miss a day. If you never miss a day, in 7.5 years, you will cover the whole Talmud. And thousands of people around the world are doing that right now. It's become quite popular to do that because people can read it in other languages besides Aramaic. This was mostly in Aramaic with some Hebrew. And if you look at the Talmud, this was all oral. It was memorized and it was shared, but eventually it was written down and written out in a bound books on your shelf. It's kind of like the Encyclopedia Britannica, if you remember what that was, because who remembers what that was anymore, right? Because now you can get Wikipedia or whatever. You can read the Encyclopedia Britannica online. You don't have it bound on your shelf, but you get the idea. The size of it is huge. And that's just one that's just one collection of rabbinic laws, the Babylonian Talmud. There's also the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi. There were these big collections of Midrash. And Midrash we probably think of as the fan fiction of the Bible, as one person put it. The stories, the backstories, the imaginative stories about the Bible. But the Midrash is also legal commentaries. There are different collections of Midrash, and most of them from the land of Israel. Hebrew, also some Aramaic. In the Babylonian Talmud, it all kind of got put together. The Midrash, it's called Agadah in the Talmud, the legal arguments. And interestingly, while early Christians were arguing about the very nature of God and all kinds of doctrine and credos, Jews, as you saw in your chapter on finding God, Jews, the rabbis of the Talmud, did not actually come up with a set doctrine or credo around God. Now, Maimonides later on, we will see, did try to give us things we were supposed to think about theology and God, but the rabbis just keep putting forth different ideas. And another thing is they don't often come up with answers. They'll argue. Some people think it's a law book. The Talmud is a law book, but actually the Talmud very rarely gives you a conclusion about Jewish law. That would be left to later codes of Jewish law. But they just like to argue and question. It's full of questions and questions about the questions and so on. So that's the nature of this literature. It's really fascinating. And that's what we're looking at today, to see what the rabbis, our ancestors from the early centuries of the Common Era, from like the first century, remember around the year 70, in the year 70, the Second Temple is destroyed by the Romans. Jews are being exiled throughout the world. Some Jews hang on there in the land of Israel. As they there were already Jews in Babylonia from the first exile, from the first temple. As the rabbinic literature develops there, this period of the early rabbinic literature, I would say, is from the first century until like the Muslim conquest. So it's in the first centuries of the Common Era. Okay, so we're going to look at some things that this literature has in common about God, and we'll let somebody read that for us. Hold on. Okay, so get our next reader to remind us of what our chapter said were some of the main rabbinic ideas about God and theology.
Carol, did you want to do that?
What do you want me to read?
Just read those little headings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No systematic doctrine,
Okay.
new names,
Mhm.
angels, God judges the world, God and Israel are joined by a special bond, God is a personal God, on the suffering of the righteous, there is an afterlife and bodily resurrection.
Hey. I'm wondering, could I get a better body the next time around? But just, okay, but if you say the traditional prayers, like in a traditional synagogue, you're actually praying for the resurrection, Mechayeh HaMetim, God resurrects the dead. We're not really going to get into that so much, but we are going to look at some of these ideas in greater depth, especially some of the new names for God, some of the ways that the old names were reinterpreted, some things about God's judgment and mercy, God being more personal, and even assuming a kind of personhood that may be very surprising, and God's special connection to Israel going far beyond covenant as it was in the Bible, this kind of the king and sometimes a king, sometimes not, but king and treaty with the vassals, and being so personal that it's like God is wearing God's love for us in God's tefillin. We'll see that too. So some pretty interesting things. So we'll continue here. And the first name for God that I wanted to share, which I think is shared in our book under New Names for God, is Hamakom. We were chanting that song, Manora Hamakom Hazeh. How awesome is this place? And that's, of course, in the book of Genesis, chapter 28. And anybody know where that comes from? You get like bonus points if you know where it comes from. Anyone know who said that? Who said how awesome is this place?
Jacob.
Right. Jacob, when he went, he's fleeing home, and our ancestor Jacob in the book of Genesis, when he arrived at a place and he slept under the stars with a stone for a pillow, and then he had this tremendous vision of a ladder going to heaven with angels. So angels, the Tanakh, the Bible's full of angels, going up and down on it. And he wakes up and says, like, how awesome is this place? I had no idea how incredible this place is. And the word makom is used many times in that Torah portion, Vayetze. And so the rabbis picked up on that. They took something in the Bible and they said, oh, when he encountered the place, when he said how awesome the place is, he meant God. Makom is a name for God, the place. Think about that for a moment. And where do we hear this? There are places that you've probably heard this before. One of them, do you have another reader ready to read?
And no, we don't see any hands.
Okay, why don't you you read this, Herschelers? Because the first one is from our Haggadah.
Okay. Blessed is Hamakom, blessed is he. Blessed is the one who gave the Torah to Israel, which is from the Passover Haggadah.
Can you extra points if you can sing it in Hebrew? Do you know how it goes in Hebrew?
Baruch Hamakom, Baruch Hamakom.
Baruch Shanatan Torah. Oh, very good. See? Yeah, so if you've been to a Seder where people sang things in Hebrew, a lot of people here have probably heard this. Baruch Hamakom, Baruch Hu. That's a rabbinic name for God. Blessed is the place. Right. And then the next one is something we say to comfort mourners. Would you like to read that? One of you read that.
May the Makom comfort you among all the other mourners of Zion in Jerusalem.
Okay, and that is Hamakom Yinechem Etchem B'toch Shar Avelei Tzion B'Yerushalayim. We say that when somebody's lost a loved one. In fact, it's traditionally said at the cemetery as the very last thing at a funeral as they're ready to leave, or we say it in the synagogue when they come back to the synagogue. May the omnipresent comfort you, may God comfort you. But it actually says Hamakom, the place. May the place comfort you among all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And that's a very unusual name for God, thinking about calling God the place, I think, right? In this book that I've been recommending, such a great book, God is Here, Reimagining the Divine by Tova Spitzer, who's a Reconstructionist rabbi. She has a chapter on this whole idea of God as place, and she retells the story of Jacob. And, the way that she describes it is that when she says, when I ask people to tell me about their God beliefs, often they have no idea what to say or simply say they don't believe in God. But if I ask them to describe a spiritual experience that they've had, whatever that may mean to them, many will tell me about special places in their lives. And she has some wonderful continued thoughts about that. So I wondered, that was my first discussion topic with you this evening, is God as Hamakom, the place. I'll write again in the chat, Hamakom. The question would be, are there some places or a special place that gives you a sense of holiness? Can you see a point, a meaning in calling God the place? What does that name mean to you anyway, to call God the place? And is there a special place that just evokes holiness? And is it the typical place? Like, is it the synagogue? Is it the Western Wall? Or is it, being at the beach, Israel, or someplace we don't even know about? And I'd like to hear from a few people if you're willing to share. Maybe just raise your electronic hands and we'll ask you to speak. Great. Got a few people. Okay. All right. I think I'm letting my helpers, the Hirschlers call on people.
Okay, so first we have iPad. I can't see who that is.
It's Elsa.
It's Elsa. Hi. First Elsa, and then we have Marilyn and Gabrielle. We have Kim. We have quite a few people, and Michelle and Carol. Quite a few
Okay.
hands.
Okay, let's let everyone speak a little bit. Okay, so Elsa.
Okay, actually, I was raising my hand to help read, but anyhow,
Oh.
I would say for me, it's Israel. And you kind of get, you just get a different feeling being there than any other, place, in the world. Just being present there makes, gives you that feeling that it's a special holy place.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I think a lot of people, yeah.
So I've been able to travel a bit, and being at Machu Picchu and watching the sunrise there while you're up in the clouds, or being at Angkor Wat in these ruins are just amazing, and you just do have the feeling that there is something very spiritual there. Not necessarily the God that we think of when we think of God, but there is truly something spiritual in some of these ancient places.
Thank you. So I think that's very interesting to consider that other people's holy places could evoke that spirituality for you. Okay, how about, let's see,
Kim?
Kim, go ahead.
Hi, I was thinking, I think my first thought was the beach and just sitting and watching the ocean and, the vastness of it. But then my other thought, for me, that's really spiritual is camping underneath the stars. So there's nothing for me when I'm camping or I've been fortunate to be able to camp out west and there's not bugs. So we roll out our mats and we just sleep on our mats and we're by a river and just to look up and see the stars at night. That's just a very spiritual time for me, or place for me, I should say.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm thinking is when people talk about natural places being special to them, I think, this is why some people wanted me to share the name of my website. I have this website called wellspringsofwisdom.com, which was all about Jewish spirituality and nature, because I think Jewish tradition recognized that in the natural world, that's where we often find our spiritual connection. And there's so many symbols of nature in Judaism. So that's why I was very excited and really I don't get a cut or a percentage off these books because Rabbi Toba here had such a similar idea, but she took it even further, I think, because she really just came out and said, if we think about God as being like water, like a cloud, like a rock, that's not really so far off from what our ancestors said. They used metaphors like that, especially our biblical ancestors, but maybe our rabbinic ancestors too. And we can use that kind of as a spiritual practice and understanding that's less limiting than some of the personified ideas of God, but we'll come to them too. Thanks. Okay, well, I think we've got time for more people.
There are some more people who had some comments. Peter and Carol Newman and George and Ellen.
Okay. But we still have Michelle and Carol waiting.
And
Yeah.
Carol, right.
Okay, so are we going to go in order of those raising hand? It would be Michelle next, I think.
Right.
And then,
Okay. So Jacob was in the place and he says afterwards, after saying, this is a holy place, then he says, but I didn't know it, and I didn't know it. And so I don't think it was necessarily the place itself, but the experience he had in it. And when we have those kinds of special experiences, there's an energetic residue that can affect the physical location. So I wanted to say that, and as far as I go, like anywhere where I can feel like relaxed and open, where I can think and I can feel, is a place that where I can be my best psychological, emotional, rational, spiritual self, you know, and strive to make a connection. But it is interesting that the rabbis chose to make that a name of God, because I think it's a paradox, because God is beyond a place, but God is also in every place, both in every place and also beyond every place. Go ahead. You're muted. Can't hear you.
Yes, no, please finish your thought. And yeah.
Okay, I think I
Sorry.
finished. Thank you.
No, I mean, you were in the middle of a sentence and I sort of jumped in the middle of it.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, I was just saying, I think it's a paradox to refer to God as the place, because God is everywhere
Uh-huh.
and also beyond
Right.
what we perceive as everywhere. So it's like, why give God that name? And I don't know what went into the thought process to assign that as a name of God.
Well, it's very fascinating. And I actually got very excited by what you were saying there at the end, Michelle. So I'm going to keep your hands up because we want to hear from more people, but I do want people to see what I had on this next slide because it relates to that. And I'm calling that God's immanence. In other words, immanence is the sense that God is close to us, that sense that God is particularly in a certain place. And that, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
because Zoom is sending me weird things every minute. Immanence, right? The indwelling sense of God. God is inside of me. God is here in the Western Wall or whatever, however you want to think of it. God is in the sanctuary. Or God is in the world. That's even what we would say. God is filling everything in the world, physicality. And then there's transcendence, which is this theological terms. God is a beyond. We'll see with Maimonides. We can't begin to conceive, or in Kabbalah, we'll see the Ein Sof, the boundlessness that's beyond. How can those two things even coexist? So a couple of different midrashim. So Numbers Rabbah, sorry, misspelled, Numbers Rabbah, a midrash on the book of Numbers, early Middle Ages, and other collections of midrash, this lore of the Bible, says, as a comment to Exodus 40, verse 35, Moses was not able to enter to the tent of meeting because the glory, the kavod of the Lord filled the Mishkan. Kavod, which is the glory associated like with a cloud, a mist that filled things, is a sense of the divine presence being within. And the Midrash says, let me illustrate by means of a parable. To what may this be compared? To a cave situated near the seashore. If the sea becomes stormy, the cave is filled, yet the sea is none the poorer. In the same way, the tent of meeting was filled with the splendor of the Shekhinah, the indwelling divine presence, yet the world was none the poorer. So I love this midrash, one of my favorites. I put it on my website under a page about the sea. And I think as people that live near the sea, we could appreciate this. When the sea comes and fills the bay or fills a cave by the sea or a tidal pool, it's filled that, but the sea is still as vast as ever. And, so it is that we could experience God in a certain place or in a certain moment, but that doesn't diminish the transcendence of that divine experience. We could have both, they're not mutually exclusive. And I think that's part of the rabbinic thought. And sometimes the name used for that indwelling is Shekhinah, the presence, which we'll see next week, I believe, becomes like, kind of revamped Jewish goddess, a feminine depiction of God. All right. But let's hear from some other folks too, with your ideas about the place. So Carol. Next.
The last quote that you put up is very much where I go with Mano Ra Hamakom Hazeh. To me, when I say that, I'm talking to the God within, Hamakom, the God within this place.
Mhm.
And if I can remain aware of that indwelling of the godliness, that everything I look at can become a special place.
Mm.
No matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, when I'm looking at the birds outside of my window and they're singing, this is the special place. This is a holy place. And when the flowers come up and they start to open, what could be holier? And my little granddaughter, when she giggles and opens her, face to me, Hamakom, God is in this place. So that's my take on Hamakom.
The sea is not limitless, where's God to see us? I think in an absolute sense. Sorry, I'm getting some chats coming in. People could read those. Carol, I have something on my wall here. Hold on. As when I first moved here, I was at one of these great home decor stores that have all the, ocean kitsch, and it said, "You are exactly where you need to be." I had been, thinking there was something I wanted to attend in the summer. I got COVID. I couldn't be there. I was very upset. Like, I should be in that place, not this place. And I looked at this a lot and remembered you are where you need to be. And so this, there's a lot of spiritual lessons to be drawn from that. Is it the place that was so awesome? Yes. And wherever the place you are, you could make that into a place of holiness. I know when my mom was in Jerusalem studying for a year, as she writes about in her memoir, or she didn't write in her memoir, but she put it, my mom had a memoir about her. I'll show you guys. Sorry, this is a bit off topic, but now I have to say what it is. My mom was widowed at a very young age, had written a memoir, Seal Upon Your Heart. And later at the end of it, there's some later material she wrote about being in Jerusalem. She studied at Pardes, an Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. And as she was getting ready to leave, she was sad because she said, "Now I'm going back to Texas, to San Antonio. It's not Jerusalem. How's that going to be?" And they're like, "But you can bring the holiness to San Antonio. You can make it, you can bring some of Jerusalem there." And there was some later rabbinic teachings that any synagogue, even Rehoboth Beach, can be a little Jerusalem. You can bring the holiness to your place. But at the same time, I still agree with Marilyn and Kim that, a place that is so full of human devotion over the millennia, right? Or a place that is such awesomely beautiful nature can also feel a special holiness to it. Okay, and we had a couple more people that wanted to comment.
We have
Carol and Ellen.
Yeah, Carol Newman and Ellen Rabinowitz.
Okay, we'll hear from them and then we'll go on to another topic. Okay.
A couple of different things. One is we've been taking a Torah discussion group with an Orthodox rabbi, and he always refers to God as Hashem, which means, I think, the name, but that's right. Kind of standard. We always use Hashem. The other thing is that one thing which to me is almost a godlike experience is watching the sunset, and we're lucky to watch the sunset almost every night, where you see the sun sink into the water. I mean, that's what it looks like. It's over the Gulf of Mexico. and it's fantastic leading up to that. And then after it, when the sky is gradually changing and you get more pink, and then it gets darker, and then gradually you see a couple of planets. And then then you see the whole sky with the stars in it, and it's pretty incredible. I have been taking a lot of photos of the sunset before, during, and after, which I put on Facebook actually. I have a whole collection, and it can be almost it's like a spiritual experience to watch the whole thing from the beginning to the dark, and then you see the sky full of stars.
Beautiful. Well, and of course, here we are by the Atlantic. If you watch the sunrise at the beach, that's a pretty spiritual moment, or the sunset over the bay, or as we've seen sometimes the sun setting over the bay and the moon rising. wow, Manora Hamakom Hazeh, how awesome is this place? And you could, if you're a mystic, you might say, oh, God is filling everything. If you're for next year's class, Spinoza, God is filling everything. There's so many ways to look at it. Thank you, Carol. And Ellen, last comment here on this.
So my place where I find presence, a
Mhm.
holy presence, is actually my greenhouse and my gardens. So we grow a lot of our own vegetables over the summer. And for me, just seeing the little sprout, come up, it's amazing.
Thank you. Well, I think that's so many of those things. We can find echoes in the Bible, tilling and tending in the Garden of Eden. We're really connecting to the holiness of our planet and the divinity in it. And actually, I think for our day and time, these are the holiest ways to find God, because we need to be in greater harmony with the planet and save our species on the earth. So definitely connecting with the rhythms of nature is paramount. Thank you. All right, so now we're moving on a little bit to other names of God, rabbinic ideas of God, and the ways that the rabbis interpreted the earlier names of God. So here's one. We need some more readers, people to volunteer to read for a moment. Okay. Can you see? Got some readers?
Yes. Well, it's kind of the same people again, but Ilsa.
I volunteer also.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I need it on my screen now, though.
Yeah, we lost it.
I lost it on the screen. I know Michael Fishbane, by the way. Oh, well, you have to show. I don't have it on my screen.
Yeah.
We
Rabbi Julie has
lost
to
the
share.
show document.
I mean,
Yes.
if I could say, if there was a recipe for how to make somebody really challenged as they're teaching a class, it would be what's happening with my Zoom, because I'm really trying to keep my cool. But Zoom just kicks me off, and I will try to address it. I have tried to address it in every possible way. It may just be that it's more capacity than I have, but even though anyway, all right, let's see if we can do it again.
So will somebody put it up?
Okay, yeah, there it goes.
Yeah, okay. The rabbinic God not only acts, but feels, reacts, and remembers with much pathos. In short, this God also has a personality, and his personality is tied to the fate of Israel.
Mhm.
Michael
Very-
Fishbane, somebody who taught in the department I was in.
Where?
I studied on the committee on social thought at the University of Chicago. Fishbane is on. I met him.
Fantastic.
Well, he's a smart fellow. I've read a number of his books.
Beautiful. That's so exciting that we're having someone read it who personally knew him. So yeah, we'll see this when we're learning about how the rabbis looked at God. Often they really saw God as not just as we saw earlier in the biblical God, having feelings and emotions and being impassioned and zealous, but God really, they called it in our book, I think, anthropathetic, that God has human-like emotions, or is portrayed that way. So now we learned the two different main names for God, Yud He Vav He, and also Elohim, right? And we said that in the Bible, those may have come from two different documents, the J document and the E document, and possibly, okay, that's a theory. And for the rabbis of the Talmud and Midrash, though, they had different connotations. So would somebody like to read this for us?
Fran,
Okay.
you're muted, Fran.
Fran, sorry, you're muted. Go ahead.
Yeah.
For the rabbis, Yud He.
We're calling Yud He Vav He. Yud He Vav He.
Represents God's attribute of mercy. Midat Harachamim, based on Exodus
Yeah.
34:6-7.
Thank you. Perfect. So, you know, when on the high holidays and other holidays, we get up and the Torah service, we chant Adonai, Adonai, Erachum Vechanun, the 13 attributes of God. These are going to be in Kim's here tonight. Her daughter Molly's going to read this at her bat mitzvah next month, right? Adonai, Adonai, Yud He Vav He, Yud He Vav He, Yah, Yah, right? El Rachum V'Chanun, that's the merciful God. It's not two different gods, but we know God is sometimes Adonai and Elohim, and Adonai, God is the merciful. So the merciful and the transcendent, not just what's tied to the natural and the laws of nature, but above and beyond. Next one, Elohim, what does that mean to the rabbis? Another reader.
So we have Elsa.
Okay, Elsa, would you read that?
Yep. Elohim. For the rabbis, Elohim represents justice, Midat Hadin, because the name Elohim can also mean judges in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, so Elohim does have the name. It is used to mean judges. It is a plural, right? And so for the rabbis, they said, Elohim is the aspect of God associated with judgment. And Yud He Vav He, or Adonai, or as somebody said, well, my Orthodox teacher always says Hashem, because for Orthodox people, unless you're saying a prayer, you don't even want to say Adonai, which is the substitute name for Yud He Vav He. But even that is too holy. So you say Hashem, the name for God. That, I think that came about a little bit later. So the two names, Yud He Vav He, Yah, Adonai is transcendence, and it is mercy, and Elohim is justice, Midat Hadin. Let's read a little midrash about that. Justice and mercy. This is from a midrash, Genesis Rabbah. It's a midrash like one of the earlier Agadic midrashim, and from the land of Israel, early centuries of the Common Era. So can we have somebody who hasn't read yet maybe read this? Is there or it can be this, if nobody new wants to read them, the same people can read. I think Peter's raising his hand.
Peter, yeah.
Peter.
Peter.
Okay.
Oops, I just lost that from my screen.
You got it, Peter?
Yeah, there it is. Okay, justice and mercy, Genesis Rabbah 12. Adonai Elohim, the names of mercy and justice created the world. To what is this like? A king who had empty glasses. The king said, if I put hot water in them, then they will expand and break. And if I put cold water in them, they will contract and shatter. What did the king do? He mixed hot water with the cold water and put them in the glasses. So too, the Holy One of Blessing said, if I create the world with the attribute of compassion alone, no one would be concerned with the consequences of their actions. With the attribute of judgment alone, how could the world stand? Rather, behold, I created with both the attribute of judgment and the attribute of compassion, and hopefully it will stand.
Okay. And we see that actually in the creation story, we saw the two names being used together in one of the versions of creation. Why? Because you need justice and mercy for the world to run. You can't just always be merciful and forgiving, but you can't just be harsh and judging, and neither can God. And then we'll see some more really personal ideas of a very caring God. This is a beautiful one from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Brachot, page 3a. Every page of the Talmud has a front and back page, the A side and the B side. So this is a beautiful midrash, and there's a little dove that I saw at the Western Wall.
It's not a midrash. It's not a midrash. Oh.
Oh, well, and Agadah. You know, the midrashim, as they became included in the Talmud, you're right. Strictly speaking, they'd be called an Agadah. But same kind of genre.
Yeah,
okay, so we have somebody else to read.
Someone who hasn't read yet, maybe? No, they'll all be up here.
Okay, well, just pick somebody.
Yeah, we have several hands up. Oh, Eric.
Okay, great.
Eric.
A personal caring God, Talmud Barachat 3a. Rabbi Yossi, I heard a heavenly voice cooing like a dove and saying, woe to the children, due to whose sins I destroyed my house, burned my temple, and exiled them among the nations. And Elijah said to me, by your life and by your head, not only did that voice cry out in that moment, but it cries out 3 times each and every day.
Amen.
Moreover, when the people of Israel enters synagogues and study halls and answers in the Kaddish prayer, may his great name be blessed, the Holy One, blessed be he, shakes his head and says, happy is the king who is thus praised in his house. When the temple stood, this praise was excited there, but now how great is the pain of the father who exiled his children, and woe to the children who are exiled from their father's table.
Okay. Just look at this personification of God. I mean, I just need to kind of let it sink in when I read a story like this. I mean, I always heard this name of God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Raise your hand if you heard that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? The Holy One, blessed be he. And in my mind, that was just like, that's the name of God. But it's actually like personification, metonym, you could say, of a part that stands for the whole. It becomes a new rabbinic, very fatherly, very caring, very anthropothetic idea of God. And if you read the whole text, it's just amazing because it says God's roaring like a lion, God's angry at us for our sins, but then it's God's cooing like a dove. So again, a nature metaphor. And God is sad that God had to destroy the temple through the Romans, but it was God because everything comes from God. And God is sorry and misses us. Like, it's so touching to think of God that way. And sometimes they got even more audacious, and they said made God even more personified, especially with this next one we're going to see of God puts on tefillin. Now, tefillin are the phylacteries. Does that help to say they're phylacteries? They're the leather boxes that contain prayers, and we're going to have the B'nai Mitzvah kids putting them on this week at Hebrew school, religious school, if they like. And like you can see, this young man, he is not God, but he is putting on his tefillin on his, to bind them for a sign upon your hand and let them be for frontlets between your eyes. And of course, Orthodox men and traditional men, and today many women too, and even throughout history, some women have put them on, holding verses from, like the Shema and other verses from the Torah that tell us about our relationship to God. And the rabbis, again, even really audaciously picture God putting on tefillin and what's in God's tefillin. So who would like to read that? Can you get us another reader, David?
I don't see anyone new, but
okay, give us someone who's read before.
Elsa?
Sure. God's tefillin, Barachot 6a. Rabbi Avin bar Rav Ada said that Rabbi Yitzchak said, from where it is derived that the Holy One, blessed be he, Kadosh Baruch Hu, wears tefillin. As it is stated, the Lord has sworn by his right hand and by the arm of his strength. His right hand refers to the Torah, as it is stated, from his right hand, a fiery law for his people, Deuteronomy 33:2. The arm of his strength, his left hand, refers to tefillin, as it is stated, the Lord gave strength to his people, Psalms 29:11. Rav Naaman bar Yitzchak said to Rav Hiya bar Avim, what is written in the tefillin of the master of the world? Rav Hiya bar Avim replied, it is written, who is like your people, Israel, one nation in the land.
Okay, so this is very typical. Don't get too overwhelmed by them quoting. It's like it says here, as it says here, the rabbis like to bring proof texts from the Tanakh. They like to tie in everything they taught to things in the Tanakh, in the written Torah, even if the things they said were pretty creative, right? Like this here. Oh, God puts on tefillin. Look, the Torah says that, or the Psalms say that, the Tanakh says that. But what's in God's tefillin? Why would God's tefillin wouldn't have things praising God? So what's in God's tefillin? Praising us, who is like your people Israel. Wow, that's pretty audacious. Talk about a special relationship with God, right? And in fact, I would say I studied a lot about this, the background to this text previously when I was writing my dissertation, and found that, in fact, this wasn't just a singular story that came out of nowhere, but there are a lot of stories like this, that the Holy Spirit, a divine voice, is praising the Jewish people. We're praising God, God's praising us, so to speak. It's a very close relationship. So that's very human-centered, kind of anthropothetic, if not anthropomorphic. Right, wow. Well, I want to look at some, before we, in our last half hour, I wanted to look at some texts about why bad things happen to good people, what the rabbis thought. And time wouldn't allow us to unpack all these texts I've shared, but maybe just one or two comments or questions about these texts about God being, the very personified like that, putting on tefillin with us in it. How does that make you feel? Is that beautiful, wonderful? Or is that, you maybe put it in the chat, I guess, to save time, put in the chat, what's your reaction to some of these rabbinic ideas about God? The place, God's wearing tefillin. God's like a father who's really disappointed with the kids sometimes, but still cares. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One. God's like the water filling the cave by the sea. God's like a dove cooing.
There are still some hands up, and I don't know if they want to speak or not, because they've been up before.
Okay.
After you speak, you have to lower your hand. So.
Oh yeah, if you did already get called on, you can go back to your reactions and lower your hand if you want.
Right now, Fran Leibowitz and Ellen Rabinowitz.
Yeah, did you guys want to say something, or did you just stop? Okay, Ellen, what do you want to say something?
So I was just curious, after reading the previous slide, I was curious why then the tefillin is put on the left hand as opposed to the right. Is there a reason, or is just because most people are right-handed?
Right, you put it on, well, you put on your less dominant hand. I know that, I don't know, some I think they're saying, I don't want to, I don't want to answer it without looking it up. I think it's to strengthen you.
I think
you put on your weaker hand. Yeah.
Your heart is on that side.
By the heart. I like that too.
Yeah.
I'm going to be teaching about this on Sunday, so I will know this all by Sunday. But
Thank you.
Yeah, but for God, either side should work, right? Okay. If you're a lefty, you put on your right hand. Fran, Fran, you'll have to unmute if you want to say something. Or else just lower your hand if you didn't have a.
No, I have a quick question. If I may, have you seen? Has anybody, many of you seen tefillin? You know what tefillin look like? Any of you? I know you do, obviously.
I think many people have seen tefillin. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. But I don't want to assume. That's why I want to explain what they are. Yeah, because we can't assume that everybody. I grew up Reform. I didn't see tefillin for a long time. Fran, did you have a question? Okay. All righty. So we're going to look at some texts about. Let's look at some texts about why bad things happen. What did the Bible say about that, and then what did the rabbis say about that? Because that's also in our book. The rabbis had some ideas about that. So I want to show you in a source sheet that I made. So this is another thing I shared in the overview, that there's a website called Sefaria, and I made this source sheet on this website called Sefaria. In Hebrew is a book. Sefaria is like a little safari of books, I guess. You can get any Jewish text almost on this site, often with translations to English, linked to all kinds of other documents, commentaries, source sheets. It's an amazing free website. So let's see what the Bible said about why bad things happen. For the interest of time, I'm going to read through these kind of quickly for you. There's 4 different ideas that I'm sharing from the Tanakh, from the written Torah. The first idea is that individuals are rewarded when they do good, and if they're punished if they do bad. And a lot of people think that the Bible is all about that, right? Reward and punishment, and you just get what you deserve. And that is the idea in at least early parts of the Bible, like in the story of Noah. The earth, Genesis 6, the earth becomes corrupt before God. The earth is filled with lawlessness. And when God sees how everybody is corrupt and evil, God tells Noah, save yourself, make the ark of gopher wood, save the that you actually get what you deserve, if you want to believe that. A later idea is punishment and reward are communal. So this is the second paragraph of the Shema. And it is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11. And it says that if we follow God's ways, and it says the Hebrew word for y'all, as we say in Texas, y'all, the plural, the plural of you is if you follow God's ways, you will be rewarded with rain in your land early and late, and you will eat your fill, and you will have, abundant crops. But take care not to be lured to serve other gods, for Adonai, you can see the Hebrew name for God there of Adonai, God's anger. Now, interestingly, that's supposed to be by the rabbis, the attribute of mercy doesn't always correspond to what's in the Bible. God, in fact, will hold back the rain, and you will be exiled from the land, and you'll perish from the land. But it's not you in particular, not just that one you, that nice gardener who we're saying you're working in your garden, that God's not withholding the rain or changing the climate because of you. It's the collective. And some prayer books took that paragraph out of the Shema, like our prayer book, but I'm going to glue it back in the back because it was like, but that's just reward and punishment, as if everyone gets rewarded for being good and punished for being evil. But it was a collective. And aren't we experiencing this ourselves as the human race? Our relationship to the planet is being messed up, and we're suffering climate change. This is basically climate change. Okay, then here's a third idea. Really, there is no rhyme or reason. We don't know why some people are rewarded and some suffer. So just try to enjoy life as much as you can. And this is Ecclesiastes Kohelet that we read on Sukkot. Go eat your bread in gladness, drink your wine in joy. Your action was long ago approved by God. Wear your fresh clothes, enjoy happiness with your partner, enjoy life, because there's no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom in Sheol, the underworld where you're going next. And I have observed that under the sun, the race is not won by the swift, nor the battle by the valiant, nor is bread won by the wise, nor wealth by the intelligent. So just more and more, nor favor by the learned, and the same bad stuff happens to everybody. So please go ahead and just enjoy life while you can. That's a third. That's in the Bible. You see, very different idea of theology. And finally, then Job, of course, is the most famous book of the Bible of when bad things happen to good people, because Job is a super perfect person, serves God with his whole heart, and he gets tested by God at the behest of Satan, the Satan, who's just a loyal servant of God, who says, well, let's sort of make everything go horribly for Job. And in the end, Job is really long suffering, but in the end, Job does question, why is this all happening? I know I don't deserve it. And God basically says, hey, did you create the universe? What do you know? It's above your pay grade, right? And finally, Job admits it. It says, I know you can do everything, that nothing you, God, propose is impossible. And I spoke of things above my understanding. Here now I will speak, I will ask, you will inform me. I've heard you with my ears, and now I see you with my eyes. I recant and relent, being just dust and ashes. Okay, So those are 4 biblical, this is in a handout I sent to you, so you can look over this later, but 4 biblical ideas, right? That in fact, people get what they deserve individually. No, you don't necessarily get, but as a collective, we do receive reward and punishment as we should. The third idea of, hey, look around you. Things are not fair. Just go for the enjoyment you can in life. That's an idea in the book of Kohelet. And then finally with Job, it's like, I know life isn't always fair, but really there's a mystery to life we can't understand, and God's knowledge is above anything we can right? We're struck dumb by the awesomeness of life's mysteries. So let's take a little look at what the rabbi said around this. Then I'm going to send you to breakout room so you can talk about some of the subjects among yourselves. Okay. So we're going to start with here. Okay. Really, this is from the Bible. It says, who would actually, Hirschlers, why don't you just read this for me? You can read the English, that's fine.
It's a little
you read it?
small.
Jews in Search of God, Seaside Jewish Community.
No, wait,
That's
is that what you're saying?
That's what it says on my screen.
Uh-oh, wait, hold on, let me try it again.
But
Okay, trying again.
That's a great
Are you
view of
seeing it?
Jerusalem right there.
You seeing it?
Now I do.
Isaiah 45:7.
Thank you, read that.
Read the
Okay.
Hebrew.
Yotzer or ubarei choshech, oseh shalom ubarei ra, ani Adonai oseh kol eleh. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create bad. I, Yud-Heh, Vav-Heh, do all these things.
That's what it says in the book of Isaiah. I, God, Yeshemai, God is one. I make everything, light and dark, peace, goodness, and bad. I created all. But how do we put it in our prayers, in our morning prayers? Read how the rabbis changed it a little up, okay? What do we say instead? We, maker of peace, creator of all. Oseh shalom boreat hakol. We don't say the bad. It includes the bad. But the rabbis wanted to include this sentiment, but they didn't want to really come out and say it. The good and the bad comes from God. Okay. Here's a story from the rabbis. This is a very powerful story about someone who went to do a mitzvah that should have given them long life, but instead it did not. And they really, so what's their answer? One of the answers of the rabbis. So,
do we have another reader? I don't see any hands up.
David, can you read this
Okay.
for me, David Hirschler?
Yep. Rabbi Yaakov says there is no reward for performance of a mitzvah in this world, as one is rewarded for mitzvot only world to come. There are 2 mitzvot in the Torah that promise long life and earthly rewards. With regard to honoring one's father and mother, it is written that your days may be long and that it may go well with you. Deuteronomy 5:16. With regard to sending away a mother bird from the nest before taking the young, it is written that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your days. Deuteronomy 22:7. There was one whose father said to him, climb to the top of the building and fetch me chicks. And he climbed to the top of the building and dispatched the mother bird and took the young, thereby simultaneously fulfilling the mitzvah to dispatch the mother bird from the nest and the mitzvah to honor one's parents. But upon his return, he fell and died. Where is the goodness of the days of this one? And where is the length of days of this one? Rather, the verse that it may be well with you means in the world where all is well. That your days may be long is referring to the world that is entirely long, i.e. reward is only in the world to come.
Okay, so we saw in your textbook, you see this, that the rabbis, one answer the rabbis have is, it seems people are not getting what they fairly deserve in this world. I mean, look at this guy who did the 2 mitzvahs at once that promise you long life, and he fell off the roof and perished. And so there must be that he's rewarded in the world to come or at the resurrection of the dead. I won't get into the details, one or the other of those. But But I think that the question is also important when they said, where, I can almost hear another voice saying this, the Talmud is made of multiple voices conversing, dialoguing with each other. Where is the goodness of days of that person? Where is the length of days? Did they deserve it? If we could let the question hang there longer and not jump to the, sure, one person jumps with an answer, well, it's in the world to come, you know, that's where the days are really long and good. Maybe we could just hang with the question. Why didn't they get what they deserved? Or what they were promised, what the Torah promised them? So I think almost the answer is almost that our ancestors struggle with these same questions that we do. And that's this question of theodicy. If God is all good and God created a good world and said, behold, it is very good and everything's from God and God is one, then where's bad from? As you saw in your textbook, some other early religions like Zoroastrianism would say there's two powers, very big no-no for the rabbis. There's not shtei reshuyot, there's not two powers. There's one, everything comes from God. How do you explain it? You figure out different ways to explain it, 5 or 6 or 7 different ways, or maybe one day you see it one way and one day you see it another way. So I'm going to ask you to be in breakout rooms for like 10, let's give you like 12 minutes, I think, and to discuss this question, okay? We've seen several biblical and rabbinic ideas about suffering and why bad things happen to good people. Theodicy. If God's so good, why do these things happen? Does any of this help you with your personal theology? Does the idea of two names or aspects of God help you? That there's one more transcendent of mercy, of kindness, and there's one more imminent, which is judgment. To say a little bit more about this, to me, it's kind of like the laws of nature. Some later Jewish thinkers pointed out that the word Elohim, that name for God, is in gematria in Hebrew numbers, equivalent to nature, hateva, nature. So nature's full of laws, immutable laws. Sometimes things just happen because the laws of nature. But transcendence is, but then sometimes people come and give love and give support. Like right now, there was an earthquake, horrible earthquake. Why did that happen? Was it an act of God? Did they deserve punishment? No, it was the laws of nature, just a natural event. But the transcendent aspect of God comes in when some people come in with love and caring and seek to help those people. All right, so when you get to your Chavrutot, you might want to break out your textbook and look on page 36 and 37 in your text for ideas about God and theodicy. And you might discuss, have any of these rabbinic ideas of God or the biblical ideas of why these things happen, do they help you to understand or to form your own theology? And again, you have access to the text that I sent out. You have access to your textbook and to your own ideas. And I'm going to create some breakout rooms. Let's see, we have now 25. Some people kind of sneak out when I say breakout rooms, but okay. Let's do like 10 breakout rooms. Does that make sense? No, how many? 8. Okay. Okay, and I think we'll just do it for like 10 minutes due to we have to conclude the class. Okay. See you.
You've got 25 screens. Right now.
So, okay. So I'm going to create like 8 rooms. So there's like 3 people or so, and 3 screens or so. Okay, let's try it. Go. You just have, we just, as people are coming back, Diane had a good question. Is there like an end of days idea in the Bible? There are different visions, apocalyptic it's called, like these angelic visions of kind of end of days, not like the end of everything, but kind of a climax of history. But if you looked in your book, this chapter for today talks about the idea of Messiah, Mashiach, you know, somebody who's going to come and bring a better world, lead us to a better world, an anointed king. That's what Mashiach meant, anointed one. You see this in the Aleinu, the prayer we say. I mean, we can't get into all these topics in the short time we have, but that's another good theological questions. So people are coming in, and as you're coming in, if you want to put in the chat some idea that came out of your group, or that you know, an insight that you had that you want to share beyond your group, please share that in the chat so we could see it. And if we had maybe one or two people want to share what something that came out of their group, or Tom, what do you want to share? You're muted though. You need to unmute. Yeah.
And just shut me up if I'm talking too much.
Well, we only have like 5 minutes, so just
Okay, 2 hours really quickly. We discussed the issue that came up right away was the problem of the idea, well, it's God's plan, and yet bad things happen. And of course, the great example was the Shoah. And I talked about my own family relationship to that. And Ellen, I don't want to speak for Ellen, but she said with great strength that she simply could not accept the idea that something is God's plan. And I responded, I don't think that that's a Jewish idea, God's plan. I think that's a Christian idea. I don't think that's a Jewish idea.
It's really, I guess when you say it's a Jewish idea, it's very interesting because there's so many Jewish ideas, right?
Yeah.
There's
I
some
don't see
people
that.
will say, I mean, I see Jews who are there very from Jews, you know, devout Orthodox Jews who are like, it must be God's plan if this happened. Like, I anyone who's been through, which by a certain age, we've all been through a lot, we could say we have to find our own, make our own meaning of why things happen. And I think the main thing I wanted us to take away from this particular subject of the theodicy is not an answer, but the question. The one who said, hey, is that God's plan? Is that reward? Is that what you promised us? That kind of protest, that voice, and that our ancestors were questioning. And remember, these rabbis who are composing the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Midrash, they were in the wake, not of the Holocaust, but of terrible destruction of the temple, of the horrible treatment by the Romans and dispersion. And they were struggling. Our ancestors struggle with the same things we do, and they came up with many different answers just as we do. And if you came away just with that, that would be great. I wanted to just conclude, and I get some more wonderful things in the chat. Yeah, is God responsible? Well, and again, do these two names of God help you? To me, it does help me to think of the God as nature, the things that just happen because of the way the world is, and yet the transcendent aspect that takes us beyond that makes us want to reach out and help, and to help others. Balance. Thank you. Yeah. Now let me show you my last slide of the day, because this is like one of my favorite rabbinic stories. I think we could end on this on a more cheerful note. And let me go through this kind of quickly. This is
I love this. I love
this. Is like one of the Talmud's most famous stories.
Uh-oh. Well, this is a completely wonderful story.
Yeah.
Can you
It
hear me?
looks like she's frozen.
Further from space 100 cubits.
Well, the great thing about this is that, you know, in the end, a voice of God appears and says to the rabbis, the halacha is with my servant, you know, one of them, and the rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis look up at the heavens. It says here that this is not a hard doctrine.
Why
That
doesn't someone read it? Why doesn't someone read it?
We can. Well, I've got it. If you want me to, I mean, I have it within 30 seconds, I suppose. But I think I'll send it out. How's that?
Yeah.
I will.
You're muted, Rabbi Julie. You're muted.
Yeah.